It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
You know how to cut to the core of me, Baxter. You're so wise. You're like a miniature Buddha, covered in hair.
But it's not who you are underneath. It's what you do that defines you.
I fought the good fight. I finished the race. I kept the faith.
I want to become a guru so girls will like me. Then I will like myself.
What's up, everybody? How are my peeps doing out there today? Welcome to the Golf Guru Show. I'm your host, Jason Sutton, aka The Guru, where it is my mission to tease out the habits, life lessons, and self-development ideas from the best in the teaching and coaching world, as well as to discuss the technical teaching and coaching ideas that will help you with your instruction immediately and help you achieve better results from your students and your life. I hope that you find this information on this show applicable to all occupations and fields of study. I'm so grateful to all the outstanding guests that have been on the show thus far and their willingness to share their knowledge and expertise. But most of all, I want to thank you, the listener, for checking out the podcast. Thank you for sharing. Make sure you're subscribing and downloading. And I just really am so thankful for all of you for tuning in. I have had several questions for those of you looking for the podcast that maybe don't have an Apple device. You can find all the podcasts, all 35 episodes on Stitcher, Google Play, Castbox. I mean, there's a lot of different apps that you can find this podcast on. Also, I will tell you that I'm on YouTube now, so I've got all of them downloaded onto my YouTube channel. So if you want to search YouTube, you can find it as well. So let's talk a little bit about my next guest, Mark Russo. He is the 2018 Mid-Atlantic PGA Teacher of the Year. He is ranked as one of the top teachers in Maryland on the top best teacher in state list by Golf Digest. He is a TrackMan certified teaching professional. He uses Body Track and is also TPI Level 2 certified. And just one of the great coaches in our industry that continues to get better every day and is just putting out such great work. So I encourage you to check him out on his Instagram and Facebook and the Twitter for sure. On this episode, we discuss a variety of topics that include his mindset and decision making to go out on his own and teach full time, which I think is a difficult decision a lot of times. So he gives some great insight on what he did, how he did it, and sort of how it all came about, which I thought was very, very useful. His keys to using social media and branding to market yourself and to create your brand, which I thought was great. I also gave some great advice to young coaches that are looking to build a game plan for improvement for their career and their life as we dive into. Also talked about some technical aspects of the golf swing that he's learned from some of his mentors that I think will definitely be beneficial to you coaches out there. We talk about so much more, and I hope you really enjoy this conversation as much as I did. It was great to catch up with Mark. I hadn't talked to him for a while, and really enjoyed our time together. So without further delay, I present to you Mr. Mark Russo. Mark Russo, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
I'm great, Jason. Thanks for having me, buddy. How are you?
I'm really good. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights. So this is going to be a fun conversation. We've got some good topics and obviously my questions. Yeah, so I think I would love to, before we get into your current position, which I think is going to be a great conversation, let's go back to the beginning. Take us back to your childhood. Where did you grow up? And give the listeners some lineage of sort of how you got to where you are today.
Well, I'm a Maryland boy, born and raised. I've been here my whole life. Did not grow up, playing golf at all, to be honest, Jason. I mean, I grew up as a baseball player to start, and then, started playing hockey when I was 10. And that was sort of my life, the game of hockey for sure for a long time. It still is. I played college hockey, still play in a competitive league, but I started picking up golf when I started working at a driving range. Just honestly, I started working there to get a job, and because they had batting cages and I got free batting cage tokens, and I ended up hitting balls because they were free. And the funny part is, life is kind of crazy. That's where I'm teaching now.
Really?
So
I didn't realize
I've come
that.
full circle. Yeah, 25 years later, dating myself, but
dude, you're still young.
So that was my. Well, thanks, man. Some days I don't feel like it, and then and then I got the bug bad, man. Honestly, and then as I started getting into the game a little bit there. Worked there for a couple of years and then worked at a military facility in the bag room. And as I was graduating college at Towson University, I was a mass comm major. I had the road kind of forked for me. I was working at Channel 2 in Baltimore in the sports department as an intern. I was up for an editing job to actually get a job as a video editor. I really enjoyed all that, my time there. But I was also working on golf on the side, and that job never materialized. And I needed a job. And I had a friend who I'd worked with at Nighthawk Golf Center. Steve Winpetron, who's a PGA member in our section still, and still a great friend. And he hired me in the golf shop at Marlboro Country Club. And that was my first job outside of the bag room in the golf shop, customer service and all that. And I never left. And, here I am. And I worked there for a while, became the head pro almost 5 years later. For a short time, then left there to be the first assistant at a high-end club, Country Club at Woodmore, and I was there for 10 years. Last 6 as the head pro. And 2012, I decided I kind of had enough of that. I missed teaching, and I came home one day and asked my wife if I could quit my job and start my own teaching business. So, 6-7 years later, whatever it is now, here I am.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I know you're doing well. I've kept up with your stuff, and you're putting out some great content. I know you're busy, and I know it was a scary decision, I'm sure. And that's one of the things we want to talk about is, and how tough was that decision to go on your own? I mean, obviously the conversation with your family and your wife couldn't have been easy. So tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll kind of get into sort of the pros and cons of. How do you do that? How do you build that business, and some ideas for the listeners?
Well, I mean, when I tell people I quit my job, Jason, people are like, wow, that was, so brave. And I always tell everybody, look, pump the brakes. I'm very lucky. Yeah. I'm a lot like you, Jason. I outpunted my coverage with my better half.
Absolutely.
So my wife is a president of a public relations firm. She's an executive. She does well. And we were able to sort of crunch the numbers and make things work. And she wanted me to be home more. At the time, my oldest son was only 6 months old. He's 7 years old now, and I have 2 kids. And I just, anybody listening to this who's in the club side and not teaching full time knows full well what it's like. You're never there. And I couldn't resign myself to that, honestly, Jason. I just, so that we laid out the plan, and she helped me get things going. And it was not easy, and it was a struggle at first, but I don't regret the decision at all. I've never missed one thing in my son's lives, either one of them. And so I looking back, I wouldn't change a thing, to be honest.
It's nice to have that flexibility, isn't it? And you don't have to, you can set your own schedule, do your deal, and then obviously follow your passion. I think that had so much to do. That's where our stories are very similar. Is when I left the club side, it was a little scary, but then it was very enlightening to, one, just be responsible for teaching and coaching and getting better at that craft. But 2 is just enjoying going to work every day, because I know I was miserable.
Yeah, I was getting to that point. I mean, I love the club where I was. The golf course is one of the most underrated courses in the whole state. Nationwide tour event there for 3 years. I mean, it was great. It was just, there were some things going on there that were making it difficult. And then the time, it was all starting to pile on. And then the writing was on the wall that it was, I'm good at what I do, but is this really what I want to do the rest of my life? And, do I want to miss what my kids are going to be doing on the weekends or the holidays, because I'm going to be there? So, you got to weigh all those important things. And that's what brought me to here.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and congratulations on that. You're doing some great work, and I know you're loving it just like me every day. Take me back. It's something that you said just a minute ago about your sports background. It makes me curious about like the hockey and the baseball, because in our business we're always teaching ex-athletes and trying to relate different sports to helping them play better golf. How transferable do you feel like your hockey and baseball were? And then talk a little bit about some of the things that you think are commonalities to each sport and how that helps, because I'm sure you use that a lot in your teaching.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of common threads. I agree, Jason. I mean, we get those people who say, "Yeah, I played baseball, and I'm trying to get that baseball swing out of my golf swing," and I'm like, "Why?"
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there's the guys I teach that hit the longest all play some level of high level baseball.
Yeah, for sure.
Or somewhere along that line. They all, I mean, it to me is so advantageous. I mean, for me, I think the transference was just some of the hand-eye coordination stuff. I mean, I was never a power hitter in baseball. And one of the things that I've learned as I've gone along here is I had a lot of that coached out of me from bad teaching early on, to be perfectly honest, prior to my dad coaching me in baseball. And I think looking back on it, I wish I'd have been told to swing harder, throw it further, because I know how much better I would have been at golf if that had been the case. But there's so many similarities. I think, for me, the hockey, hand-eye coordination and the pivot is very similar to taking a slap shot. I think for me, the biggest area that hockey helped me with golf, and when I teach hockey players, we talk the same language, which is always fun, is short game. When you're making little plays in tight around people's skates, in and around the net, puck in your feet, you have to have touch and feel of your hands and understand where the blade is. And that has really helped me in the short game area. I've always been pretty good at opening the face and sort of getting a sense of a picture in my mind of what the face should be doing relative to the ball and the turf. Because I think of the hockey background of being able to handle the puck in tight and having to manipulate the blade of the stick. So I think that's where hockey really has helped me to some degree personally, and where I can sort of use it when I teach people who maybe have some experience with it too.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would have guessed it was more with the power and the inclination of the plane and the stick that would have been important, which I think it is. But that's a great point. I never really thought about the sort of the micro skills of feel and touch. Yeah. That would be transferable. That's really cool. Do you get a lot of hockey players up, because you're a little bit farther north than I am? Do you get a lot of hockey players that you teach?
Not a lot. I mean, the sport has exploded in the last 30 years up here since I started skating. But I teach some kids who play. I teach a couple of high school kids who play. They play high school golf, and they also play. Their high school season is in the spring, so right now they're playing hockey, but they're still coming for lessons on the weekends on occasion just to stay in it. And I for me, it's obviously, as a passion of mine, it's also a nice bridge to connect with them. But we do use some of the same language, and I think it helps. I've got a couple of sticks in my teaching bay too, that I'll use for examples and things like that. So I do get a few, and they're always fun to teach, and they're certainly coordinated. If they're any good at all, because it's, when you're handling a puck and a stick on two butter knives, basically on ice, you got to have some coordination, and it definitely doesn't hurt your golf game. How about that?
That's awesome. Yeah. A lot of respect for those guys. Unbelievable athletes. Be able to skate and really do all that stuff. So kudos to that. And you're still playing hockey. You say you're playing like in a men's league. That's awesome.
Yeah. I'll never stop, honestly, Jason. My wife kind of rolls her eyes, but I mean, I'll never stop playing. I'm playing in a competitive league here still with, a bunch of us are still over the hill, but we compete okay. And it's a great time too. Just hanging with teammates, different elements sometimes in golf, room full of guys and teammates is nice. So it's cool, man. I never going to stop.
Well, I know you're in great shape. I see all your posts on Instagram. You working out. So I want to get to that a little bit later, but let's dive into helping that individual that is in your position. Maybe he's a club pro or maybe he's an assistant pro and says, "Hey, I may have some talent and a passion to teach full time," and doesn't have a place to go. Right. So how do you start? From the ground up, I guess, is just, let's dig into that topic. And then what was your mindset, and then sort of what were the steps that you took to start that ball rolling when you said, "Hey, I'm going to quit my job and go"?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the first thing was, and I will preface it by saying that I got a little bit lucky, Jason. I mean, I was looking around through some of the PGA career link stuff to see what jobs are around, anybody looking for teaching pro. And I just happened to stumble on this one at the facility, as I said earlier, that I used to work at as a high school kid. They were looking for another instructor, independent contractor. And, I said, "Hey, I this could be a great fit for me given where we live. And it was closer to home. So I think the first thing would be, doing your homework and trying to find a facility that is looking for someone to grow business there and drive revenue to the facility. I think the ideal situation, but the scarier situation, is to be, as I am, an independent contractor.
Right.
Because you control your own destiny. Not to say that, going to a facility and offering your services and saying, "Hey, look, I want to work here and start this business," and see if they can provide some kind of salary. That not to say that that's not a good situation, because, in all honesty, Jason, one of the big things that you have to remember is if you go out on your own, health insurance is expensive, man.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine.
So that's something you got to think about. And again, I'm lucky in that situation as mine's through my wife's business.
Right.
So I never had to deal with that hurdle.
Yeah. That
for
is
a lot of
lucky.
people. That's
right.
At times a deal breaker. So I think you got to figure that out.
Sure.
So that's a big thing first. So I think finding the right facility that has room for growth, and you providing them, writing down what you think you're going to bring to the table, and promoting yourself and showing them how you can drive revenue, and being specific as possible is at least the very first step.
Yeah. Did you have
and then figuring out how?
Did you put together a proposal and like a business plan and submit that to that facility?
I didn't in my situation. I met with the ownership, and they had the owner actually remembered me from way back, but
that was cool.
I knew it was. He always liked me because I always kept the bar nice and clean. I was always a little OCD with that side of it, so
nice.
It was good.
Yeah.
But I went in there and I basically said, "Look, I want to bring a new teaching business here. I'm interested in growing a business. Here's, you guys know me. The other teachers who were there at the time also knew me, and I just laid it out to them that this is something that I want to do, and I'm planning on getting technology and sort of doing some things that are a little bit different than maybe what you've seen before." And I think they were open to that, thank goodness. And they gave me the space, and that's all I really needed. And then I just sort of worked it from there.
Yeah, I think I know when I was, I guess it was before I left Dana's and before I went to Carmel, I had several opportunities of people wanting me to come teach at their club. But I think the biggest challenge was the assistants or the other staff members that are already giving lessons. They view you as a threat, right? I mean, that's a difficult.
Yes.
It's tough to sell the fact of the big picture of, hey, I'm going to create value for the entire club, but also for the staff, because I'm going to come in and train you, and you were going to learn together. And was that a part of your deal, or did they give you any pushback on that? Were they open to say, hey, we're excited for you to come in because we're going to learn?
It was a little bit of a different situation in that the two other teachers, and now it's just one their other teacher than myself. They had been there a long time. They had somewhat established businesses, but they were not, one of them was not really full. The other one was steady and had been there a real long time. He still is, and still is steady. He and I have been friends since I worked there. He was there even then. So it's been that long. So we knew each other. So our relationship was good. And I had good personal relationship with him, and I kept it friendly. And I tried to do that on purpose from the beginning, just letting him know that, hey, look, you do your thing, I'll do my thing.
Right.
All three of us are very independent, because we're, it's a little bit of a different dynamic. 3 independent contractors at a range facility, and there's plenty of students out there for each of us. And it's pretty much, look, everybody do what you want to do, and let's see who wins the race, so to speak, or who can fill their book first. I was unafraid, and I would say this is an important thing for anybody trying to do this. I was unafraid to change what the status quo of what they were doing. They were doing the same type of programs, charging the same thing. When I first came in, I did that to start, and then it was very quickly I started changing my programs and my rates away from theirs.
Right. Separate yourself a little bit.
My own thing.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. And that was, I think, an important thing. And I wasn't also, and this was a little bit down the road, a few years into it, I was also unafraid to start charging more than they were.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's smart. Again, You've got to do something to separate that perception from the people in that area. Right. And then obviously you knew where you were going. You're a continuous learner. You're getting better. And the technology, I'm sure, helped as well to say, hey, this guy's a little bit different.
Yeah. And I mean, when I looked at it, 2012, when I started it's crazy that it seems so long ago, but not that long ago. But
it was just a minute ago.
It seems like it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then I think it was 2012. I went to our section teaching summit down at Kingsmill with our buddy Chris George.
Yep.
And at his place, and he had James Lights there. And there were, honestly, Jason, there were only like 50 people in the room. And looking back on it now, James Lights would fill the room now, right?
Sure,
but
absolutely.
5 or 6 years ago, people were still learning TrackMan and getting into it. And that was my first exposure to it. And I immediately came home to my wife and said, I got to find a way to find the money to get this thing, because nobody around me has one. And this thing is just wicked good. And I was able to find a private investor who helped me work the finances out to get TrackMan. And that was, like, to me, that was the start of being, starting game changer for me, to differentiate myself and to create new business and buzz towards my lessons.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great start. Obviously that's difficult, but I feel like, you just got to figure out how to do it. And that's what I always tell people. And that's a good segue into, the investment when you first start teaching. And let's start with the bare bones of, like, what advice would you give a young coach or a young teacher that is just starting out? And then let's talk a little bit about, the different avenues that they can take in order to build their skills and get better. And let's say they can't obviously afford TrackMan right away. What kind of advice would you give that individual?
I think the first thing would be, look, if you can't invest in some kind of a launch monitor at first, and I think we're really, really close to some super affordable technology. There's already some out there now that are solid, but I think first thing is invest in a good camera, maybe like I use an iPad.
Right. iPhones are great now. It's amazing.
Yeah. A stand. I use the cradles from Iographer. I found that from Martin Chuck. Mm-hmm. So they fit your iPad. You can get a wide angle lens that goes on them and a boom mic that goes on there. And, first off, you pull that out and the student says, wow, that's kind of a nice looking rig there. Like, it makes you look official.
Right.
And then I give all my students through an app. I use the Huddle technique. Mm-hmm. Every lesson I'm sending them videos. I'm also getting in front of the camera during the lesson and filming little snippets, sending that to them. And at the end of the lesson, I'm standing in front of the camera and I'm summarizing what we did, what they should do, and positioning myself, showing them what I want them to do, so they have a review they can go back to. If you show up with just, a professional appearance, a good energy, and a good camera, and you're giving them something, even if it's as easy as that, they perceive that as a very high value because it's something you're handing them in a very easily accessible way. They feel like they walk out there and like, okay, this guy was ready, he was prepared, and I walked away with something. I'm not trying to figure out or remember what he said. He's sending me everything I need to know right here.
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
That's a good start.
Presentation is, and I think initial, that first meeting is very, very important. That first impression is huge in gaining their trust. And like you said, figuring out, hey, this guy, whether he knows what he's doing or not, he's at least trying. He's gonna be there with me through the journey of my learning. And it's not that expensive, right? I mean, I do the same thing. Whether I'm using Body Tracker or just using my phone, you can text somebody their video. I just turn the camera on and do a recap, and you can send it to them during the lesson, and I think that means a lot. Everybody wants to see or wants a recap of what happened in that hour.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a starting point, and then you got to weigh the, beyond that, you've got to training aids that are easy, helpful. Alignment rods are actually one of the best training aids out there, right?
Sure,
I mean,
no doubt.
Pool noodles. Get yourself a Tour Striker Smart Ball if you can get one these days.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, just a few things that you can do some basic stuff with, so you can provide feedback and obstacles. And then as you get busier, find the technology that fits into your budget. That you get into these silly discussions on what's better, TrackMan or Flight Scope. And I'm like, look, you can have discussions all you want, but at the end of the day, you won't be able to afford a Flight Scope. So if that you can afford, that's fine.
Sure.
Just get whatever,
if
that's what you want. But you just got to make sure you're going to find a way to get the return on investment out of it. And for me, the return on investment TrackMan, I got it, it's been 5 or 6 years now, has been, now that I have an indoor room to use in the wintertime, I'm still teaching 50 to 60 lessons a month when it's weather's like this. I mean, the only reason I'm not teaching today is because the roads are so bad, but here right now. But I'm teaching a lot in the winter, and I'm using the radar indoor simulator. So it's paid for itself for sure that way.
So what do you think, from like, say, somebody coming out of college or even a PGM student that's looking to gather the information? Do you like the certification route? Do you promote shadowing, which, it's kind of, I think that's a great way to start learning, is to go watch as many great teachers out there in your area or travel as you can. Tell me a little bit about how did you learn, and then what do you suggest to that young pro?
Well, I think when I started, Jason, I realized very quickly that while I had taught, I didn't really know how to teach. And
it's like all of us.
I think, and I realized I was behind the 8 ball, and as is my nature, I went like into the deep end as fast as I could. And I was doing certifications, and I was trying to go watch people. Like, I was doing everything. And if I had to go back in time, I probably would have taken some of that money that I did on some certifications early on, and some of the other things I went to, and spent that money on traveling to go watch people teach a little bit more. Yeah, that's great advice. I think my advice going forward would be, if you want to get certified in something, just make sure it's something that everybody's that has gone through it. When you talk to them, they say, yeah, I definitely use this. If it doesn't fit your teaching style or whatever, maybe it's not the best thing, although that could be good too, because you see the other side of it and it gives you another tool in your toolbox. But I think there's a balance there in terms of spending your limited income when you're first starting. I think you're better off maybe do one certification, something you think can really help you, and then spend the rest of your time trying to find good teachers. Start within your section or your area where you can just drive to them,
right?
And then travel and see some other people and spend some more time with them. In hindsight, I wish I would have done more of that. I've done some of it, but not nearly enough.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. So let's dig into that a little deeper, because I think that question, I'm going to rephrase that question going forward, is what would we tell our 25-year-old self, right? I mean, it's like, if you could go back in time, what would we do differently? So, when you go shadow, and this is a question I get mostly from the young guys that come shadow me, is, what should I do? And you hope you wouldn't have to coach them on that, but I think it's an important point, right? I mean, do you go, like, I've had kids come shadow me and not take a note, and I'm just, I get pretty upset about that. I'm like, what are you doing, right? I mean, what did you come here for? Regardless if they agree with what I do or don't do, I think it's important to gather the information, go test it, and then, start to figure out what they like, what they don't like. So think about if you're going to go shadow a coach, what would be that process and what would it look like?
Well, I think the very first thing, if we're talking about it from square one, would be drafting a professional note to them, requesting their time and making sure it's professionally done, even in an email, and then following up with a call. And obviously trying to make sure that you are super open to doing it on, obviously, and I feel like this should be obvious, but it may not be to everybody, but it's not about your schedule, it's about theirs.
Right.
And then I personally think the time when you go to see someone shadow, taking notes and listening, I think there's a time and a place to talk and ask them questions, but that is most definitely not when they are teaching. I think your job in a shadowing role is to be exactly that, quiet and off to the side, unless they engage you to say, hey, what do you think? Or,
right,
you understand what I did there, or whatever. If they engage you, fine. But a lot of times you're in a, if you're in a private setting, which, if a student is okay with you being there, then you're lucky to have that opportunity. Make sure you're not interjecting. You need to be quiet and just stay there and listen. And then after lessons are over, make sure you've got your questions ready and get after it. Get the information. Why did you do this? What were you thinking here? What about this? And, fill in the gaps. But during the lesson is not that time, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. That when the kids come to watch me, I'm always like, there's two things. Don't get in my teaching bubble, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't get in the,
Exactly.
down the line. I show them kind of where I'm going to be, and then don't say anything, and we'll talk afterwards. Usually the best. It's always great, I think, this time of year, because I like when the kids come in and I'm not full all day, because I can give 2 or 3, 4 lessons, and then we have time to talk, right? I mean, but I think what I would tell them too is just have questions ready, right? What do you want to know, and what do you want to ask, and just be prepared. And I think it goes a long way.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Jason, that's perfect, because I think prepared is the right word. I mean, you can't make that kind of a trip and go through that whole process and go there and just be blank.
Right.
Like, research the person, look up what they do, look up their history, look up their grammar, whatever, get a feel for what their type of teaching. You look at people's Instagrams, you get a pretty good sense of their style a little bit. Everybody's got their different style, right? I mean, you look at my Instagram, right, then you look at Gigi's Instagram, a little different.
Yeah, exactly.
But, I mean, a lot of us would like to have Gigi's bank account, though, because he's doing all right. But
he's doing fine.
It's, yeah. And I just think you got to know what you're getting into, and as you should, because I think it's also good as a part of this, try and see different types of people. We've heard before, don't be afraid to go see somebody you maybe think you disagree with. You might be surprised. And I think you get to know somebody on a personal level in a little more of a one-on-one situation. You can be surprised. I mean, I didn't, I know you've had Sean Foley on, and mm-hmm. I didn't know Sean until he came when I was chairing our section teaching summit last year. I had him come in, and I got a chance to hang with him for a little while the night before, and I couldn't believe how different he was from the public perception of him.
Yeah,
it could not 100%. Have been more 180.
Yeah,
and so I think it's important to figure out, go different people, and then you might be surprised that what they teach might be closer to what you like to teach than you think. And then you might walk out and say, you know what, it was what I thought it was, and I learned some stuff, but I'm good where I am, or I can take away one or two nuggets, and get as much of a broad stroke across the industry as you can get.
Yeah, that's great advice. And you don't know. And like I said, and I've tried to not judge people or their perception of teaching style until I've actually talked to them or seen them teach. And I'm the same way with Sean. That's when I met Sean a few years ago when he came to the Wells and he gave a lesson to one of my students, and it was awesome. I mean, that he was very open and very caring and really gave a lot and created a lot of value to me and my staff. And that's the person, that's the real person. It's not the one you see or you hear about on the Golf Channel. So it's
exactly.
Yeah. And I think, when you go and shadow somebody, and I think that's an awesome point, to go try to shadow somebody that maybe you don't think you're going to agree with their information. But I always encourage young coaches to look at more than the information, right? So observe their body language, observe the questions that they're asking, observe how they interact with the student. The IQ is very, very important, but the EQ, or the emotional intelligence part, is something that I think young coaches have to really jump on early, because that's the most difficult part to train. So talk to us a little bit about some of the tactics, or maybe, books you've read, or anything that sort of help you to develop that sort of EQ side, the self-awareness, the empathy, the body language reading, the learning styles and all that.
Yeah. I mean, I can't agree more with you, Jason. And I will say, and I'll be perfectly honest, I'm not much of a reader, but when my wife and I have this discussion a lot about, we call it EI, emotional intelligence,
right.
Same thing you're talking about. And I think both of us have been in client-based industries for so long. You start to develop that understanding. I mean, I've always been a pretty good communicator, and as I went through being in the club side and being a head pro, you're having to deal with different personalities. So often you've got to be you have to be somewhat of a chameleon and be able to read, like you said, body language and things like that. And I can't answer the question in terms of what books to read, but I just could tell you that if you go watch people teach, especially, I mean, I'll give two examples of people I spent time with, and, Andrew Rice has become a mentor and a very good friend of mine. I mean, Andrew is one of the best at dealing with people and figuring out what's in front of him. Martin Chuck's the same way.
Yes.
John Bierkin, I spent time with John this summer. We had a great time up at Aronimink. And just the way John handles people and figures out who's in front of him. I watched him teach all day. I think.
So let me stop you. Let me stop you there, just selfishly, because I'm actually having John on the podcast here very, very soon. Tell me something. Tell me something. I just met him. We had talked online for several times, and I just met him at the certification that I just hosted here with James Redyard. So it was great to spend a couple of days with him, and super smart and fascinating guy. So I was like, I got to get him on the show to tell me a couple of things about John that you learned, and then maybe a couple of questions you think I should ask him.
Ooh, okay.
It's a good one, right?
Yeah, that is a good one, Jason. I think for me, so from a teaching perspective, if we're just getting into the technical side of teaching, just a hair here,
sure.
I love what John was teaching with his students. It sort of matched up. He taught a lot about the trail arm, and a lot of it is matching up with some of the stuff that I've learned from Ryan Chaney, and that, and some other people too, where, teaching what the trail arm and how important that is.
Yeah. I love
to
that.
Striking the ball well. And John was really harping on that with a few of his students and made some really good changes. I think the other thing I really picked up from a teaching perspective with John was, John is not afraid to have a student hit small, slow, easy half shots for, if you need to, for almost the entire duration of the lesson. He is not afraid to make them make small swings. He's not going to rush it, and he's going to make sure. And to that end, when you get in that scenario, people get a little bit, they get a little antsy because they want to hit the big stick, or they want to make a big swing. So your emotional intelligence and your approach with them has to be really good to disarm them and make them feel like, I'm just going to give myself to this person, and I'm not going to try and be, do my own thing here. This guy knows what he's talking about, and I'm good. And John is really good at that. Yeah. He's good at slowing the lesson down, and he's good at convincing the person in front of him that I got this. I know what I'm talking about. You just
I know what you're saying.
Me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He's got a very soothing voice. You know what I mean? It's kind of like Martin Chuck, one of the greatest voices in golf instruction is Martin. So I could see that. Yep,
for sure. So, that was my experience with John. I mean, in terms of a question you should ask him, good Lord.
I know you guys here. Let me help you out a little bit, because I did reach out to a couple of our other friends that know him, and he, I think, shares your hockey passion. Did you guys talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, we did, because John's a tortured Whaler fan, because they moved the Whalers from Hartford
to Carolina now, right?
It's funny we're having this discussion. Yeah, correct. And I actually, and I told John, a good friend of mine is a former coach for the Capitals, Dean Evison, who played much of his career in Hartford, and John watched play growing up. And it was funny we were having this discussion, Jason, because I just found a Dean Evison signed Hartford Whaler card at home today, and I'm going to actually send it to John because he's such a Whaler fan. So, you can ask him a Whaler question. You just better be prepared. He wants the Whalers back in Hartford, which I'm not so sure is going to happen. But, John's a great guy. So, there's so many good people out there, but I think the ability to control a lesson and everything, and just how lesson structure is another one, Jason.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like watching how people structure a lesson. I mean, like I said, I spent time with those guys, Andrew and John, and I've watched Ryan teach. I've taken lessons from Ryan. I haven't sat and watched you teach. We've talked about getting down there, but
you got to do it.
Do a little bit of teaching, and I know I do. But so it's just getting as many different views, because I think that's another big thing. It's not just the information. It's not just how they speak to the student. It's also how the lesson is structured. So there's like these different areas that you have to learn to get better.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. So I didn't mean to interrupt you there on the EQ part. So you were kind of going on that, but I think that fits nicely into that box of like how important that side of it is. And I think, as young coaches, the certifications are great, because they're coming out of college with such great information, and obviously it's on the internet now. It's very easily accessible. I think just developing, that other side, that bedside manner is so important. Yeah. Anything else to add on that? I know I kind of interrupted you there, but
no, not at all, man.
Yeah,
and I think it's just learning from others and just doing it yourself, and just like the information, you're going to make mistakes in terms of how you handle people, and you just got to figure a way to learn from it. I mean, I'm sure there are books you can read out there, but to me, nothing takes the place of being in the hands-on situation and screwing it up, frankly. And it's talking about earlier about talking to your younger self. I mean, when I think back even to 2012 when I started the teaching business, it's amazing how much better I am at not saying anything than I was 6 years ago. Like, to just keep my mouth shut and not say anything instead of trying to coach every second.
Yeah,
and letting the student fall on their face a couple of times, honestly, and just sit there after they hit a couple of bad shots and not say a word, and let them figure it out, and then say, okay, you hit a better one there. What did you try and do there? What were you trying to do? and see if their answer matches up with what you're trying to get them to do. It's just all of that stuff just takes time, as well as you're growing a business, but you're also growing yourself through this whole process.
Yeah, I think it was. I'm trying to think. I think it was John Graham that actually mentioned on the podcast when we talked about talking less. It's the more information you get, and the more sure you are of what you're trying to do, the less you speak. And I think that's just growing as an instructor and gathering the information. Because I always tell the young coaches when they come watch me teach, they're like, "Wow, you didn't really say a whole lot." I'm like, "Well, you love to be in my head right now, right? I'm thinking about 4 moves ahead of if I do this to the student, this is going to happen and all that." So you're thinking, but you're not speaking. So I think that's an evolution for sure, don't you think?
Oh, totally, man. I mean, I always chuckle when the student hits a couple, especially if they're newer with me, and they hit a couple shots and they're like, they hit like 3 balls. And they're like, "What do you think?"
Yeah, exactly.
and I'm like, I don't think anything. I'm thinking a lot of things right now, but I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
3 shots is not enough for me to say something, because I got a lot of questions for you.
Right.
What's your intention here? What's your vision of how impact happens? There's just so much going on. But I mean, I do less coaching and asking more questions, especially of the people in front of me, than they ask me, because there's just so much incomplete information.
Right.
When we're standing there with them, we just have no clue. Like, there's so much going on there, physically, mentally, emotionally, all that stuff. I'm not about to just pull the trigger and just shoot from the hip. Maybe I used to, but I'm definitely doing less of that now, because I know better.
Yeah, I think you just mentioned a really, really important word, and that's intention. And that, whether it's any part of the game you're teaching, if anybody doesn't learn anything else from this conversation, is you've got to figure out that student's intention, and then changing that intention is such an important part of being able to not only change motor patterns, but just change philosophy and their current model.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time, but it's happened plenty of times where you explain a situation or a movement or whatever it is you're doing to a student, and it goes in the face of what they thought is supposed to happen, and it like opens the window for them to just go out and fly, because all of a sudden they're like, "Oh my God, that's not what I thought was supposed to happen." And sometimes you get really quick results from that. And those are the most, fun times. And that's not all the time, because they still got to make a change. But sometimes that happens because they're just being, their intention is like, a ball and chain around their ankle. They can't do anything because they mentally have no concept of what they're trying to do at the time. Right.
Yeah, that's very well said. So you mentioned the trail arm and some things you learned from John and Ryan. If you've listened to any of my podcasts, you know that I'm like obsessed with the trail arm and the trail shoulder movement. So talk a little bit about what you believe there and some of the things you've learned and how you've applied that to some of your lessons. You can give us maybe like a cause and effect, faults and fixes type of situation if you want. We can talk some technique.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, sure. I mean, I think as I've evolved as a teacher, I think when I started, Jason, I was okay with people moving the club in the backswing kind of all over the place, because I kept saying to myself, you know what? If they can put the club at the top of the backswing anywhere they want, as long as they can get it to where they need to on the downswing, fine. And then as I've gone along here, I've realized that most of the people we teach flat out can't do that.
Right.
And so they have to have some, for lack of a better word, structure going back to some degree, that sets them up for an easier time on the way down. And so
I love that.
For me, it's just, I think it's, the evolution is really, I don't like to see, the right arm, in that retraction movement, if, people are listening to this and not watching it. So if you grab a lawnmower cable and pull the cable back and your elbow goes in behind you,
Yeah.
that's the retraction movement.
Yep.
And a lot of people have that movement because with the club inside, they pull it in and then they're either going to run out of shoulder mobility. So then the club goes up.
Got to lift.
And then it's got to lift. And then
Yeah.
where are we going from there? Well, most people, and I'm not one of those people, I actually will do that too much and drop it in. There's my slap shot background. But
Yes.
they will push on it going out the other way. And so it's that ugly cycle. And, I'm not smart enough to know necessarily the answer why this is always the case. But when you keep that right arm in a little bit more of an outward, out in front of you, folding movement, and the club heads out, you're able to then get that, external rotation or the forearm, the forearm supination to get down there and lay that club down a little bit flatter and get the club head from the inside and all that good stuff, non-slicing stuff. So
yes,
I think that has been something that I've really started to figure out more and more in this whole process. And I think real quickly too, and I had this discussion with a great discussion on this with John Bierkin, and maybe this is the question you asked him too about finding yourself as a teacher. I think sometimes when you're doing all the certifications and all that stuff, Jason, what ends up happening is you're getting a lot of information, and it's very similar to trying to give a golfer too much information in a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
You start to have so much stuff rattling around in your head from all this new things you're learning that you have no idea who you are as a teacher.
Makes sense.
And
yeah,
it's taken me a while to figure out, I've got to take a stand here and decide on what I believe, and I can have some flexibility to it. But the stuff with the trail arm and some of the few other things here is starting to become more of where I am. And I'll be perfectly honest. I've had some instances before where I was having a hard time helping people because I had so many different things going on in my head about how I could help them instead of just doing what I needed to do to help them. It didn't matter how I did it.
Right. Yeah, I get it.
So the trail arm stuff, I mean, to me, you guys were doing Facebook Live the other day, and I threw a question on there about trail arm stuff. And you answered it very similar to the stuff I use. The one with you put the left arm, if you're the right-handed golfer, that left arm under your right elbow and kind of hook it with your hand, and it kind of blocks your retraction. And then the smart ball's great.
Yeah. And I think that's more, and my
students have a hard time with that.
Yeah. I think, I don't know that I answered that as well as I wanted to, but yeah, and I'd say that drill was more for sort of the elbow separation rather than, keeping the length in the right arm. Because it's a very difficult, there used to be an old training aid, you probably remember, it's called the swing extender. You used to put it like in the crook of your elbow, and it would keep them from retracting. But I didn't like it because the player didn't have to do any work, right? They didn't have to actually do it. So that's why I'm so big on trying to get them to actually, keep the right arm, like you said, feeling like it's extended longer in the takeaway. And I think, and I love what you said there, because a lot of people, I think a lot of teachers, and especially young teachers, get caught up in hearing experienced teachers say it's all about impact. And I'm like, well, that's awesome. But if you don't think some of the things that people do in their backswing is not influencing their transition and their ability to get to impact, then you're crazy, right? So, but the answer to your question there going back is, and again, way above my pay grade, but I've talked to John Sinclair and Tyler about it. There's some forces and torques that are in play there, that when the club gets behind them early in the backswing, that's causing them to steepen it and, come over it like you said. So I think there's a lot of value in getting the golf club to go back reasonably, I wouldn't say on plane, but you know what I'm saying, just more in balance or getting the hands deep enough. So talk a little bit about, because the stuff that I've been really digging into is kind of early transition, or like, P5, P6 stuff where the right arm, for the average players, tends to straighten too early, affects their sweet spot control, it affects their path. What do you like to see in like 5 and 6 the trail arm do ultimately if they can actually move a little bit with their body, we're assuming.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ultimate goal not the ultimate goal, maybe that's not the right way to say it, but I think I'm looking for an elbow position that is a little more out in front of their right hip, out in front of their right side, and a little more bend in the trail arm. I mean, I think, one of the best ways that, I've helped people, for me, you get a lot of people who have longer backswings, and I think you can have the debate about, some people need longer backswings, some people need shorter backswings, and I think, one of the drills, and I'll give Ryan credit for this one because he showed this to me, and it's helped me a lot with people getting their trail arm under control and getting them better at impact. Is just having them to take a pitching wedge and have them start to hit 50-yard pitching wedges and just hit nice little small half shots, make good contact, something that they probably wouldn't do normally with a pitching wedge. And then you say to them, okay, I want you to take that 50-yard backswing, and I want you to hit it as far as you can.
Right.
And what ends up happening is they'll start doing it, and they'll start flushing it, thinking their backswing is still a 50-yard backswing. And you and I both know that that ain't happening.
Right. Feeling real.
Yeah. But when you video them, their backswing is in a much more commensurate position to where they need to be. And they always look at it and they're like, oh my God, that's where I am. And I'm like, yeah. But you need to just keep feeling that. And what happens is their right arm doesn't get in way behind them too far. They don't break down. Their wrist angles don't start, we don't start getting more extension. And then, all that unneeded stuff that we really, is unnecessary.
Right.
And they're able to start finding a more compact feeling thing, in their golf swing. They feel like, man, I feel like I'm making like a punch shot here. I'm like, that's what good players feel more of. It's more connected. It's more, they're engaging the ground better because they don't have as many moving parts and things, getting out of whack. So I think that one to me has helped me a lot with people, was just starting with little shots to get that trail arm under control, to get them to feel good impact, and then just go faster and harder. And as soon as that breaks down, you go back.
Yeah, I love that. That's you heard me on the podcast. I call that the 3/4 straight arm drill. And it's just, if you don't know anything about the golf swing, you can start somebody in that sort of length, and I think they're going to get better pretty quick if they understand impact and they can actually move. I love that. When I spent some time with Andreas Calli, and I was asking him about that because he'll start people at 6 and then go, have them go to 8 or 9 and just go just from there. And it's amazing, like you said, and you put them on video, and of course the runoff's going to be, bigger in the backswing, and they're actually taking it back farther than they think. But yeah, I think that's fantastic. I mean, that could help anybody. If you're stuck in a lesson, I always bring them back to short. But I like that idea of saying, okay, go short and then go faster, because it really syncs them up, I think, a little bit. And you also start to see where the power sources are. Right. I think that's important too. And I mean, I'll do that with TrackMan. When what I'll end up seeing sometimes is, initially when they start getting it, their swing speed might be a little slower when they're doing it. But I know that they can get that back up, but they're more efficient. They'll hit the ball as far or farther with this more quote unquote compact motion. And I think when you start to feel that and get comfortable with that, you start, like you said, I think that was important what you said there, finding out your power sources, and then you're able to sort of then just keep pushing into that power source more and generate more speed that way, rather than through maybe a more inefficient method of, a lot of extra hand action, a lot of extra levers and things like that, which can create control issues. So I think, that's, to me, it's just been such a good one, to help people, get an understanding of that trail arm and how to get it, out in the right place coming into impact. Yeah, and then help them to understand that it shouldn't straighten prior to impact is interesting, because I get that answer from students all the time. I mean, they think that, and I'm like, no, not quite. So, if we can get them to be softer with that right elbow, and get them in reasonable sequence and then explain to them the extension happens, just past impact, and it opens. That's that intention piece again.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's so many people who want to think those arms have to be super rigid. I mean, and then that's the other thing too is, having your framework for what you like to see, and then being able to, again, we're talking about this from perspective, starting a business and learning to teach and getting better, is being able to be good at making adjustments with the person in front of you within that framework. I mean, I had a guy I taught the other day. I teach. He's a big barrel-chested guy. Used to be a firefighter. Has very limited mobility. Breaks down a lot. Lifts the club. Cups the wrist big time. And we worked on his wrist angles and the backswing, which made his swing shorter, which was fine. The only problem was he couldn't move his left arm across his chest because his chest is so wide.
Right.
So I said, look, here's what I want you to do. Feel the left wrist in that more bowed position, but let your left arm and your right arm fold. Let them bend.
Yep.
In the backswing. And that gave him the freedom to not feel so stiff and rigid, and he hit it so much better. So I was able to get the face up where I wanted it with his wrist angles, but I had to maybe teach something maybe a little more unconventional to him to allow him to be more comfortable and do what I asked him to do. And, it worked. So you've got to be able to adjust on the fly in those scenarios.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And that's a great example. It's not all about making your students look great on video. I mean, it's about getting them to hit the ball better, right? I mean, you got to deal with that person and what they can do, how their body can move. Talk a little bit about, because we'll go into some personal development stuff here in a second, but I'm curious to hear how your teaching summit went. I know you had Joe, speaking of wrist angles. That's what kind of made me think about it. So because I've learned so much, from Sinclair and him and some of the guys that are doing 3D, actually what's going on with wrist angles. So how did that go? And did you get to spend any time with Joe?
I did. I mean, it went great. It was nice not to. I had chaired the event the last 2 years, and I wasn't the chair this year, which was
okay. I thought
phenomenal.
You were in charge of it.
No,
no,
I'm the education committee chair for the section actually, but Fran Rhodes, the director of instruction at TPC Potomac, did it at TPC Potomac, and it was a great 2 days. Fran did a fantastic job. We had, Dave Phillips was there in the morning, yesterday or Tuesday, whatever day that was, and then Joe was great. I think I didn't hear anything from Joe that I didn't think I wasn't already going to hear.
Right.
But having him in the room and talking to some of the folks and explaining some of his ideas, and I think there were people in the room who maybe don't teach full time like we do,
right,
who got a little bit of a soft crash course on wrist angles and how they work, and advantages to what they do for the shaft positioning. And I think it was great. And Joe was entertaining as he of course always is. And
sure,
I got to spend a few minutes. We chatted for a little while about, before he went on, honestly, not so much about golf, it's more about, terrible 80s movies and things that we like to watch that we always talk about.
Roadhouse.
And, Dukes of Hazzard. We're huge Dukes of Hazzard fans. So,
nice.
We got a good funny discussion on that stuff, but he was great. And I think, it was nice to get his take, and, we had a nice mix of people. I mean, Todd Anderson was there the first day.
Mm-hmm.
Todd's a little bit more of an old school teacher to some degree. He has all the new tech, but he grew up in the Golf Digest schools with some of the greats. Cool perspective there. And then, you get Dave Phillips, who maybe bridges both of those gaps a little bit. And
more
then,
TPI.
At TPI, they're,
mm-hmm.
They're just doing stuff that, their knowledge and their curiosity is just, knows no bounds. And then, then you get Joe, who's, a little more into the the newer teaching, if you want to call it that, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
And I think it was a great mix for everybody involved.
That's awesome. So you mentioned earlier, how important failures are in our life, right? And I know I've had plenty that have sort of,
mm-hmm.
You look back and say, that's not exactly the way I planned it, but a lot of times it springboards you into more success? Have you had any of those times in your life that you could share, or in your career that's you say, hey, this was a tough time, but I learned from this and it sort of helped me to get to this, more success, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it was I'll put it to you this way, Jason. I think there's, and I'll only speak for myself and not for anybody else, but I think there's times in this business when you're teaching where you feel like you've got the world by the tail and you really have it. And then just like the game itself, it'll turn on you and bite you in a heartbeat. And then you'll get a student in there and you feel like you absolutely did zero to help them. And I think those are the times where you can say, you can lay the blame and say, oh, well, they didn't do what I wanted, or they weren't a good student, or whatever. And sure, those things happen sometimes, but those are the times that you will either get better or you will stay stagnant. It'll be just stagnant and you'll never get better. So I specifically remember a lesson where I gave a guy a few years ago. It's probably more like 4 years ago now, and he had the shanks. And anybody listening to this knows, those are never easy. Sometimes They are, but sometimes it's just god awful.
Sure.
And he had him, and perfectly honest, Jason, I couldn't fix him. I couldn't get rid of it. And at the end of it, I tried to keep him positive and everything through it. But I mean, what are you going to do? The guy just paid you and you didn't help him.
Right.
I mean, imagine going somewhere to pay for a meal and you don't get the meal. It's essentially, that's what happened. And that really bothered me. And all the bad lessons bother me. And if they don't, that's a problem,
Yeah.
So that led me to asking more people in our industry who were smarter than me, okay, why does this happen? What are some causes for this? And it led me on a journey to find out how to teach better in that area, specifically like fixing shanks. Why is it? It's not just that you're standing too close to the ball. Most of the people, that's never the issue. It's, it's what the club face is looking like. It's shaft positioning on the way down. It's hand path. It's like, there's so many different things, but if you know the causes, you can get rid of it pretty quickly. But at that time, I fell right on my face on that one. And it drove me to say, hey, I can't accept this. I've got to get better at what I'm doing. And so, I feel like most of the time now I can fix them. Still get some ugly ones here or there, but usually I can get out of it.
Yeah.
So, situations like that, man, they make you or break you pretty much.
That's a great example. And we've all been there. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I tell my guys, because the guys that work for me are younger, and, they get really down. And after they have a bad lesson, I'm like, look, one, I'm excited that it bothers you. Right. And I'm excited that you're going to lose sleep over it tonight, but you've got a team around you that's going to help brainstorm and try to figure out what happened and how we can do better, because that's what high performers do. And also I encourage them to have some form of reflection, right? So I get them to write down what they thought they did well, what they thought they could have done better, what did they miss, is there any process that you have, or do you journal, or what type of reflection or note taking or anything that you do? Aside from losing sleep.
Well,
that's like me.
I certainly will do that. Yeah. I mean, it'll bother me in the car the whole way, driving around. I'm not much of a journal note taker. I never have been. And I think for me, I will go back and watch what I say on those. See, when I send people those videos, I'll go back and watch what I say on those.
Yeah, that's good. That's a form of reflection.
To review what I'm doing. And I will, on occasion, put the camera on and not give it to the student. I will video parts of my lessons, just to go in and say, okay, what am I sounding like? What did I say there? And just to not only to listen to what I'm saying, but just to see what my body language is like, and I think, you know, mentally, everybody does it differently, I guess, is the answer to your question, Jason. I think
Sure.
for me, I don't need to journal it. I just know it's going to eat at me, just like it ate at me when I didn't play well defensively when I was playing hockey, and it still eats at me in men's league. You know, like I think people who want to be better and who get better and get better at their professions, it doesn't just apply to their profession. It's sort of everything in their lives.
Right.
You know, I mean, you're a father just like I am.
Yeah.
I mean, we both have those days where, I mean, I don't feel like I did a good job as a dad, you know, and I'm going to try and be better, you know, and I think it's just about everything we do. And the minute you start making excuses for yourself, or you don't really take any accountability at all in those situations, that's a bad time right there. You're headed down a bad road for sure.
Totally agree. Yeah, that's really great advice. I love that. What is one of the most, or let's say, what is one of the best or most worthwhile investments you've ever made in the last 5 years? It could be money, time, energy. It could be anything.
Boy. Well, I said it earlier. I mean, and I know this is one that maybe is not applicable for everybody, but I think TrackMan was the best investment I made early on, not just for what it's done for my students, but how it's helped me become better as a teacher. And, you know, you get all these debates, well, TrackMan's not giving the lesson, you are, and all that. And I get that, but you start to learn a lot when you look at the information and relate it to what you're seeing. I think it makes your eyes better. And I would say that now I use TrackMan a whole lot less than I used to. I have it running, but I don't use it. I'll have plenty of lessons where I don't use it at all. Mm-hmm. So I think obviously that's a big one. I think additionally from that, I think the time I've spent, you know, just the time I spent going to see people teach has also been great. I mean, you know, I can't sit here and say any of the certifications, to be perfectly honest with you, Jason, any of the certifications that I spent money on have totally panned out the way I thought they would. So maybe that's the opposite answer to your question.
Yeah, no, that's good.
You know,
yeah,
I just feel, well, I've done a bunch of them. I mean, I'm a TPI certified and I've learned some stuff from them, and I want to finish it and become level 3. I don't do the screenings. I have somebody I'll send people to, and I'll do some basic stuff just to make sure. But, you know, I've done some other ones, and I won't name them, but you know, it's okay, that I felt like, you know, weren't really worth my money in the end for what I was doing. So, you know, and I think frankly, the best investment I've made in terms of just for my business is just becoming more savvy about social media and how to promote yourself. And I have to give my wife credit for a lot of that in terms of training me, because that's part of what she does in her business. And, you know, if you're going to be a young instructor starting, you better have your ducks in a row in terms of how you're going to promote yourself, because that stuff's essentially free.
Right.
So if you start to build that momentum in your brand, you know, out there, get yourself a logo professionally done, and then start to build your brand through the social media areas, start building that up, and then word of mouth starts, and then things start rolling. That's how it's happened for me, for sure.
Yeah. So, and that's, I'm glad you brought that up, because I meant to expand on that a little bit earlier in the conversation. We were talking about starting out so you do believe in self-promotion and marketing. What are some of the, and I do as well, is like, what are some of the tips you would give to the young coaches out there starting out? Any like bullet points or just little key things that they could focus on aside from the obvious?
Well, I think I think it's really important, Jason. I think number one, and I had this discussion with a young coach at the teaching summit actually this week, and I said, look, when you start out, you may want to teach every type of person and do everything. You're going to need to. You might have to do some of that early on to just make money and make ends meet. But at some point, you're going to have to figure out who you are and what kind of student or area you want to operate in, what kind of space you want to be in. I started out trying to do junior camps and all that stuff, and I just didn't enjoy doing them. I did them at the club when I was there, and it was more of a babysitting thing. It wasn't the kind of programs you guys run there.
Right.
And I realized very quickly, I don't want to do this. So I stopped, and I was happier for it. And I devoted my energy in other areas. And I finally figured out my clientele is, I have a few real good players, but my clientele is the core golfer, say 5 handicap to 25 handicap. Like, that is my niche. Adults. I still teach a few kids here or there too, but it's mostly adults. So I think first thing, as soon as you can afford to do it, start to specialize. And once you figure out who you want to teach, you go all in. And I think you also have to make sure that all your social media stuff meshes with your brand. I try, and you'll see this when you look at my social media stuff. I don't post personal stuff on my Facebook, business Facebook,
Right.
Twitter, or Instagram very often. It's very rare. Number one, I don't really like doing that. Number two, I want everything to sort of filter and create that picture of my brand and match up with what people get when they meet me in person and take a lesson. So I think that's really important. If you're out there screaming at somebody on Twitter, or you're out there posting yourself and your buddies out there, boozing it up at the bar before the concert on your Instagram page, and you're using that for work, I don't think that that's probably the smartest idea. That's going to turn somebody off in a hurry. So that would be my advice as a starting point for a couple of things.
Yeah, that's great advice. So sort of find your lane, sort of find your niche, and then make sure your brand and what you're projecting out on social media is actually who you are. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally fair.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think that's great.
And it's not to say that, I teach predominantly full swing stuff, but I do coaching with my students. So we work on short game and everything.
Sure.
But if I have questions and deep putting questions or things like that, or wedge questions, of course I teach all of it, but I'm going to go search out somebody who can help my student if I need to, But, I think you said it right on the money there. Like, you find your lane, and then the other thing I told the guy the other day, Jason, I'll just say this because I don't want to forget to say it, is if you're starting your own business and you're going to be an independent contractor, create an LLC with your business name, get a bank account for your business that is at a separate bank from your personal bank account, and get a good accountant. Okay.
Yeah.
Because that was the first two were the best piece of advice I ever got from the controller at my old club when I was getting ready to leave. She said, make sure you set up an LLC and don't do your banking for your business at the same bank you use your personal. It helps keep everything separate and on the up and up. And then you have a good accountant who you trust, who can, wade you through all the write-offs and all that kind of stuff. It's really important. Really important.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really good. It's stuff you would just not think about.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah.
When you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, or you've lost your focus temporarily, you get stressed, what are some of your go-tos? What do you do and why?
You mean when I'm stressed in teaching, or just
no, just in life? Let's go life. I mean, everybody knows what you do when we're all stressed in teaching.
Yeah, that's true. I'm also chasing 2 children around, 2 young ones. But I think for me, playing hockey is my release to some degree. I just love it so much. And then, I'm actually sitting in one of my other areas as I talk to you here in my gym, at home. This is my area, where I come and shut the door, and, I can grind it out and just sort of let the energy out and do my thing. I don't get interrupted here. I think it's important with what we do. You talk about standing on your feet, teaching all the time, and the physical aspect of doing that. Not that we're going to equate that to, construction or mining or anything like that. But you're on your feet.
Yeah, it is physical.
It is physical.
Yeah.
And I think there's also the emotional impact of that. When you're putting as much emotional energy into your lessons and trying to be all in for somebody, at the end of the day, you can be super drained. And I think you need places where you can get away and just suck in the silence, frankly,
Right.
and have it be quiet, or your music or whatever it is that does it for you, just so you can recharge. I mean, I do a lot of that when I'm in the gym, and after my wife and kids go to bed, I'm up at night. I'm a bit of a night owl, and I'll do some work in the office or whatever at home, or just getting away by myself, not talking, just, letting my emotional batteries recharge a little bit. I think it's important because, and to be perfectly honest, Jason, I mean, you can't afford for those things to be on empty when you go to teach your lessons, because it comes across, and then it can have a negative effect on their experience, not to mention whether or not they get better. Which can also then have a negative effect on your business, which you obviously can't afford. So,
right. No, that's awesome. That's kind of why I asked that question, because I think, I'm trying to stay in shape. I'm not as good a shape as you, but it's been important in my career, 15, 20 years ago, whatever, when I started running and trying to keep the energy up. It's super important because, like you said, you want to give that 6 o'clock the same attention as you gave the 9 o'clock or the 7 o'clock. And it's not easy when you're doing it all day and, for a long period of time. So, you're only as good as your health. Your dreams are only as good as your health as well. I mean, I think that's where, we all have big ideas and big dreams, but if we're hurt or if we're tired or sick, then you can't do that. So I think that's just fantastic advice.
Yeah. I mean, I can't, and to be perfectly honest, when I left the club and I quit my job, Jason, I mean, you and I didn't know each other back then. It was just after that we first met that year, I think. But I mean, I'm 5'9" and I was 192 pounds.
Wow.
I mean, I was, like a running back, and I let it get away from me. Free meals at the club will do that to you.
It's easy. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I started to lose weight and then, do some other stuff and get in shape. And then 2016, the beginning was when it really started. I got a program from my coach, and that was the change for me. And, part of the change, to be perfectly honest with you too, was the fact that, and I'm saying this because I care about all our fellow professionals out there who are listening, is make sure you're going and getting blood work done, because November of 2015, I was in good shape. And it was just before I really started to get in better shape. I got diagnosed with diabetes. So,
oh, wow. I didn't know that.
1.
Yeah.
So, that's another motivator for why I'm in the gym regularly and watch what I eat, because I can't afford to. I got 2 kids and a wife that I need to be here for. So,
that's right.
And it was totally on a lark. I didn't know. I wasn't really having any symptoms. And I went for a muscle pull, and they told me my blood work was, showed it. I was, my A1C, which is, your blood glucose level and all that stuff, everything was through the roof. So I can't emphasize enough, like what you said, staying in shape enough for what we do, but also doing it for your family and getting blood work done regularly. If you're out there, I mean, I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't done that, so it's super important for all of us to stay healthy and mentally and physically, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I was not aware. That's crazy. But yeah, I think, and it's also, and another part of that is setting examples for our students, right? I mean, we're sitting there preaching to them, hey, you need to get in the gym, or you need to stretch more, or you need to do this and that.
Right.
And I found myself putting on a few pounds last year, and I was just like not happy with what the product I was putting out. Right. So, I mean, I got to work and was like, let's get back to what made you great. And I think that's just great advice, because we're the role models, and we're setting the example, and we're the coach. So we better be, I think, fit and be able to do the stuff that we're teaching.
Yeah.
Or at least close.
At the end of the day. yeah, exactly. I mean, everybody's gonna be different, but I think, we have to, I'm not going out there and shooting 68 or whatever, but I can demonstrate all the stuff that I want my students to do. I'm confident in my ability to get out there and demonstrate. And on the flip side of that, on the side of golf, is if I'm telling my student, hey, I think you might need to want to do this, help you hit the ball better physically or whatever. They see me on Instagram. They know me and they see me in person. They know I take care of myself. So, they, like you said, all that stuff as a package carries some weight with them, and sort of in all the boxes that we have to check off as coaches to help people get better at the game. And, fitness or at least a fitness competency is one of those. And we know not everybody's going to do that, but it certainly can have an effect.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. If you could have a gigantic billboard where the message would reach billions of people, what would you put on it and why? The $1 million question.
Man, you ask deep questions, man. I think the billboard, if I'm talking about about coaching and golf and finding somebody in golf, I would say the billboard would say, find someone who cares. I think for me, I've said this in some of my, other speeches and other people I've talked to and told them. And I think showing your students that you care is one of the best lessons I learned early on from some of my mentors. And I think, you said this earlier, if you don't have good bedside manner, they're not coming back. And I think at the end of the day, I'm confident in my ability to get the information right. And I feel like if they are confident in that you care about them and you want them to succeed, if you don't have the information, that's not necessarily going to bother them as long as you're seeking it for them. But they're just not going to stay there with you if they don't feel like you're all in and you really give a crap, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
If you're just there to take their money for an hour and send them on their way, then, I don't know how successful you're going to be in our industry to some degree. So I think find someone who cares might be the billboard for golf, but that would probably be stretched to other stuff too, I guess.
I can give you another billboard if you want one for life. You got like a favorite quote or a saying that you live by? Anything that you want to add? I'll give you two. That's okay if you don't.
Are you giving me one? No,
yeah.
I can't think of one right now.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to ask the question in reverse. Do you have one?
Yeah, mine is it's very similar to that mantra, but it's if you can help as many people get what they want, you can have everything you want. It's a Zig Ziglar quote.
I like that.
That I like just kind of live by, and and again, not from a selfish reason of helping other people to get something back. It's just one, doing the right thing is always the right thing, and then two, it's just what you become as a person, through that reaching out or helping other people, I think is just super important. So it's the same thing you said. It's just showing them. That's how you show people you care, is because you want to help them and not want to get something in return.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, the first person to give me that that advice was Rick Krebs, who was our 2001 Teacher of the Year in our section here at Mid-Atlantic. And Rick helped me out early on when I was trying to get past the playing test. I didn't grow up playing competitive golf. I could play decent, but, that was a different animal. And he was helping me, and I was, charging me almost nothing for lessons to help me. And he said, Mark, and he's very direct. He looked me straight in the face and he was like, you got to show your students that you care. And he was really passionate about the way he said it. That always stuck with me. And that's sort of where I got in it. And then, and I've said this before too, but the other thing he told me was the art of teaching. This is a little different, but the art of teaching is fixing one thing that fixes three things without the student ever knowing it.
Okay.
Like that one was like, oh man, that's gold. Like that's what good teachers do. Like you said before, you're thinking 4 steps ahead. You're trying to fix that one thing that's going to knock the other dominoes down. And so you don't have to say it to them.
Right.
And that's just like, that's the ultimate. If you can be that good at this, I'm not so sure I'm at that level all the time yet. I'm working on it, but it's a never ending thing. Absolutely.
No, well, you're doing great work, man. I'm really, really happy for all your success, and I know you're going to keep getting better, and I'm here if I could ever help. Give everybody, and I really appreciate your time. This has been such a fun conversation. Give everybody your platforms, to how they can reach out to you and say hello or reach you on your website.
Yeah, everything is sort of this is the other branding advice across the board. Have everything be uniform.
Right.
MarkRussoPGA.com, and then I'm Mark Russo PGA on Twitter and Instagram, and I have Facebook as well, Mark Russo PGA, and then my YouTube channel is Mark Russo Golf. Don't know why Mark Russo PGA was taken. I have no idea. So I don't know who that guy is. And then and Mark Russo PGA at gmail.com if anybody wants to email me or whatever. I'm out there, and I love getting on those platforms. And the cool things about those things, man, is you get to meet great people like you. I mean, that's how you and I met initially, is through Twitter and stuff. And then
that's right.
So it's so cool, all the people we've been able to get to know and meet through these things. And the idea sharing is probably the greatest part of it all.
Absolutely. It's all about building relationships, and I value our relationship and our friendship. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge. And I know the listeners are going to appreciate it too.
Well, Jason, thanks so much, man. It's always great to catch up with you, buddy.
Absolutely. We'll talk soon.
All right, man. Take care.
Yeah. What's up, everybody? Guru back here again with just a couple of things before we wrap up. First, a big thank you to Mark Russo for coming on the show and sharing his insight, his story, and so much great information that you can apply, and being so transparent, which I think is a fantastic quality for us coaches, is really just to be honest about some of the failures that we've had out there and some of the learning lessons that's going to help all of us get better. So thank you so much for that, Mark. You can follow him on the Instagram and Twitter and Facebook at Mark Russo PGA. So go give him a follow, go check him out. You can follow and reach me on Twitter and Instagram at Golf Guru TV. I appreciate you guys following. Feel free to reach out on Instagram or Twitter with any questions, or hit me up on the DM if you don't want to make it public. Always glad to hear recommendations for the show. What can I do better? What did you like? What didn't you like? Also, check out my website at www.golfgurutv.net, where you can find out more from my teaching and coaching, and email me a question or comment at golfgurushow@gmail.com, or once again, hit me up on the DM if you have any questions. We are going to continue to do our CGA training sessions that everybody seemed to enjoy last week with my staff. Got a lot of great input on that format that we did for Facebook and Instagram Live last week. So we're going to continue to do that. So we need some questions. We want to get the dialogue going. I want to hear from you, the listener. I know you guys are listening out there. I know you're busy, but it'd be great for you to reach out. Throw a review my way on iTunes. If you're on iTunes, that would be awesome. And I really appreciate everybody support and checking out the show. I'm enjoying doing it. Got plenty more high-performing guests coming down the road here very, very shortly. So this show and all episodes of the Golf Guru Show was produced by myself, Jason Sutton. Music is by Zach Mullet, a.k.a. Cutta Beats. And I leave you with one of my favorite sayings, the infamous Jim Rohn, R.I.P. Mr. Rohn: study, practice, teach, and then pass it on. I'll talk to you next time. Thanks again for listening.